WCNC Charlotte. This is Flashpoint, where power and politics collide, and the tough questions get asked and answered.
Hey folks, welcome to Flashpoint here inside the WCNC app. I'm Ben Thompson, joined by Julie Kay. You know, we pride ourselves here at Flashpoint trying to cover a diverse set of public policy issues, whether it's here at the city level or state level or South Carolina, North Carolina. Admittedly so, we've been very Charlotte focused lately.
There's so much going on.
And unfortunately, we are again.
Hey, we got to do it again.
We got to do it again because we've got data centers that have really driven to the forefront of public policy, not only here in Charlotte, but in the state of North Carolina, I feel like across the country. Yeah. There's been like a groundswell of sort of pushback as we turn to AI and everything else. So we got to talk about that. Charlotte's in the search for a new mayor. Got to talk about that. And then, of course, there's always the ongoing issue with I-77 toll lanes. So a lot to talk about.
I was at I think it was a 6-hour-long city council meeting on Tuesday.
Yeah.
So I certainly have a lot of thoughts. But we're talking to Councilwoman Dimple Ajmera, who really has led the charge on the data centers.
Yeah.
She's the first person I really spoke to about wanting those restrictions, not just for where they go, but also closed-loop water systems, impact on energy. Because we're seeing so many pop up in the Charlotte area, one right in East Charlotte, really kind of leading that charge of the pushback. 2 hours, I think, of that city council meeting was the public hearing on data centers. And if you haven't watched that, even just that chunk of the meeting, I rarely would tell someone to go back and watch a city council meeting. It was interesting.
Wow.
It was quite fiery.
That's an endorsement right there.
I know. Go guys, go watch the city council meeting recording. But that's where we're going to start. And then, of course, we've got to ask her about the other big things. They adopted a process to choose the next mayor. Of course, going to have that done in the next month. And so things are going to move quickly.
All right. Here's the interview. Joining us now, Charlotte City Councilwoman Dimple Ajmera. Councilwoman, thanks for joining us. Good to see you as always.
Thank you for having me, Ben.
So council is planning to vote June 8th on this 5-month moratorium for data centers. As you know, data centers already exist. Some are currently in the works. In your view, what does this pause, what does it achieve?
Well, Ben, this gives us enough time to do our homework. So you're right, data centers currently are allowed by right in 9 zoning districts, which includes mixed use, uptown core, so in residential communities. So this gives us an opportunity to put regulations in place to protect our taxpayers, our residents, and our health. And I want to be very clear, this conversation, it's not about whether AI is good or bad. This conversation is not about anti-technology or anti-growth. This is about how do we ensure that we protect our taxpayers, that we protect our residents, and then we protect the quality of life for our residents who live in our city.
I feel like everybody loves technology and they love data, but they hate data centers. It's just like a punching bag right now, I feel like, in American culture. And some of that probably well earned, if we're being honest. Why is it, devil's advocate here, why is it not just easy enough to say, you know what, let's just ban data centers? Why is that not a good approach?
Well, there are a couple of reasons why that's not a good approach, because, you know, even the city of Charlotte needs the data centers. I'm talking about small server rooms. Think about hospital system, think about the city, the county, the CMS. We all need a server room to protect the data. But what we do need is protections in place so that the cost is not being passed on to our residents, that we protect our taxpayers, especially when it comes to energy costs and infrastructure costs. And we also need to make sure that we have some safeguards in place to protect our water and to protect the communities who live. In fact, when we adopted the Unified Development Ordinance a few years ago, Ben, data centers was an emerging use. What we are seeing data centers now, these are hyperscale facilities, like millions and millions of square footage versus smaller server rooms. So when we were discussing the Unified Development Ordinance, we did not anticipate having multi-million-dollar building proposals for to support the AI growth. So the Unified Development Ordinance have allowed some of these facilities by right. Over 70% of data centers that do exist in the city of Charlotte are built by right, which means it does not require council approval. It requires no community input. They can go by right and develop it. So that's why I called for a pause, because there is a sense of urgency here as this industry is moving at such a fast pace. We are seeing these data centers being proposed. We need to make sure that we are not just seeing growth at any cost. We are obligated to make sure that we grow responsibly and we protect our taxpayers and our resources, especially our water.
Dimple, I was there for that many hours long council meeting on Monday. I think we had 36
Bless your
people
heart.
signed up. Bless yours. I mean, it was a long meeting. And the majority of it was those data centers and people speaking on it. The majority of them, of course, against and in support of that moratorium. What was your biggest takeaway from what you heard in that, multiple hour public hearing?
So I loved a few public speakers, and they were experts. So one, we heard from an engineer who actually works in the AI tech space. And what he said really stuck with me. And I have had many, many conversations with Craig Reynolds. And we may not even see eye to eye politically. He's a Republican, I'm a Democrat. But what he did say that stuck with me, he talked about this conversation is not about whether AI is good or bad. He said this is about putting safeguards in place so that we are known as a national leader when it comes to resiliency and protecting our residents and our natural resources, especially water, energy grid. So I love that we can agree on this issue, because this is not a partisan issue. And then we also heard from experts, right? We heard from Catawba River Keepers. They actually make sure it's a nonprofit that works to ensure that we have clean water. And we also heard from experts who work in public health. We heard from Southern Environmental Law Center. So I have been having conversations over past several months with WCNC and some of these subject matter experts who have helped cities, towns, and municipalities put a pause in place and help with regulations. This pause means that we go back and start putting protections in place that, hey, we will need a reporting on how much energy you use, how much water you use, and we need to make sure there is a closed loop system. We need to ensure that the cost that you are doing business, it's not being unfairly passed on to our residents, especially when it comes to energy. So some of that we do not have in place. We do not have currently a framework in place when it comes to data centers. And what I hear often, as one of the experts from the Southern Environmental Law Centers focused on in her remarks, is that this is also an issue that is an environmental justice and equity issues. Because what you see, as many of these facilities are being proposed, they're being proposed in the Crescent area. They're going in West Charlotte, East Charlotte, and some in the university area. And that is a concern, as we are seeing more and more of these facilities being proposed too close to the residential communities. In fact, the presentation that was done by our planning staff clearly stated that some of these facilities sit within 500 feet of residential communities. And that should be a concern for everyone.
Yeah, what do you think you talked about safeguards, you talked about accountability for how much water and power these places use. Knowing that we're talking about a 5-month pause and not a firm decision, talk a little bit more on some of those other safeguards you think are likely going to need to be put in place.
Absolutely. So our goal is to meet with some of these experts and also with the industry and put regulations in place. So this 5 months will give us that time. But what I see is ensuring that our residents are not paying the cost. That is number one. Number two, we also need to look at noise study. In fact, many municipalities do require these facilities to have noise study done. We currently do not require it. And that is the reason we need to move with a sense of urgency, because they can go by right now before we adopt the pause. And then also we need to ensure that there is a closed loop system. What I'm concerned about that even with the closed loop system, I want to make sure that the water is treated before it's being released back into our water system to ensure that there is no harmful chemicals that are being introduced. So there are so many proposals that we have received from experts who will help us with putting regulations in place. And another important point, if these environmental concerns do not concern our residents, one thing that I think will hit everyone is the pocketbook issue. Because these facilities, I am tired of hearing that, hey, they generate massive amount of property tax. Yes, they do. But let me be very clear. They get sales tax incentives from the state. And that's under this old state law, which gives incentives to these large facilities so they don't have to pay sales tax on electricity that they use, which is a lot, thousands of homes, as much as thousands of homes. And when they don't pay electricity, that means your local government receives lesser sales tax revenue. So local government receives sales tax revenue as well as property tax revenue. And that's how we address public safety. So if they're not paying their fair share, ultimately our residents are subsidizing some of the core services that they receive, whether that's police, fire, infrastructure. And I think those are some very serious concerns and questions that we need to ask to ensure that we are not subsidizing these massive facilities that generate billions of dollars in profits on the back of working people.
I love the nuance of this discussion, because it's not always conducive to TV news and people thinking about property taxes and sales taxes and subsidies for businesses is not usually at the top of their mind until it affects them. And it could not be more important because it does affect anybody. I want to switch gears.
Absolutely. In fact, Governor Josh Stein did ask state legislatures to reconsider some of these incentives that data centers currently get, because we don't need to compete with other cities, municipalities, or other states for these facilities because they are coming. So even state legislatures, not just Democrats, Republicans, this is a nonpartisan issue, they are looking at removing some of these tax incentives because it is costing currently the state of North Carolina $50 million in tax, sales tax. That's how much more revenue we would have gotten had it not been for this tax incentives. That means more revenue also for the cities like the city of Charlotte, where we are trying to balance our budget. We want to make sure that there is a pay parity between the fire and the police. So all of these issues are interconnected.
Oh, for sure. And these businesses have the pleasure of being located in the great state of North Carolina and the city of Charlotte, and they should feel lucky for it. Since last time we spoke, there's a mayor opening rather unexpectedly in the last few weeks. The mayor announcing she's resigning at the end of June. Applications open this next week. I'm going to just go ahead and put you on the spot. Give me some names. Who do you think would be good interim mayors of the city?
Well, Ben, I can tell you that application process starts next week. It will open up next week. We adopted the process just on Tuesday, and I do not know all the names that will come in front of us. And there are names that are currently being considered, but you know what? They may not even apply. So I've heard certainly the names that have publicly announced, but there are names that we have been told that I'm not sure if I will apply or not, so I don't want to put it out there. I just really want to see whether I have the support or not before I apply. So I think publicly the folks who have announced are Jennifer Roberts, Brendan McInnes, James Smudgy Mitchell, and I'm sure there'll be more that will apply. But this is, at the end of the day, I think us adopting the process on Tuesday night hopefully addresses some of the concerns around trust in the outcome of this process and ensure that there is accountability and transparency in this process. Because, I was out for the weekend over the long weekend, and I was bombarded with so many calls because they were concerned that this process might be rigged with someone who is applying internally. So us adopting the process on Tuesday night hopefully addresses the question of fairness, and it hopefully addresses concerns around trust in the process and ensuring that we will be able to make a fair, objective decision in coming weeks.
As you know, Charlotte City Council has done this in the fairly recent past, before your time, but in the last 10, 12 years. One time they went within the council with Patsy Kinsey at the time. Then they also went outside of council with Dan Klotfelter. What are your thoughts, hypothetically speaking, James Smudgy Mitchell, what are your thoughts on picking somebody who's already on council to do this? Do you feel comfortable with that, or is it not something you're really comfortable with?
Well, for me, at the end of the day, it's not about internally or externally, whether we pick someone internally or externally. For me, we need to ask a bigger question. Is this person the right person to do the job and provide a steady leadership over the next 18 months? We have some critical issues coming in front of us in the next 18 months. So we need to ensure that person is capable to do the job, can provide a steady leadership and a balanced leadership, and that is committed to the city of Charlotte. I think those are the questions that I am asking. What's in the best interest of the city of Charlotte? Because we still have 18 months to go.
A couple other things that stood out from the decision made about which process. I know we chose the regular as opposed to expedited. What are the reasons, the importance of having that public forum, and also asking that question of, do you intend to run in 2027?
Yes, that's a great question, Julie, because I did make a motion to go with the standard process because that's what we had used in the past. This gives us an opportunity to have sort of a conversation with candidates. So my colleague, Councilmember Mayfield, suggested doing an interview versus just the public forum. So it's just not a one-way conversation. And so the difference between the expedited and the standard process, it is that component, which is this conversation where we hear from the candidates. The question about whether someone is going to run in 2027 or not, it is a non-binding, but in the past we had used that. In fact, when we did fill the vacancy for District 6 seat, when Councilmember Bukhari went to DC, we did ask that question in the application. So people wanted us to be consistent. Well, my colleagues wanted us to be consistent in asking that question, even though it's non-binding.
It's non-binding. So is there really a practical way to prevent somebody from using this as a springboard for a 2027 run?
No. No, the question is no. I mean, the answer is no.
Yeah, no. I appreciate the directness and the bluntness. All right, one other topic.
You gotta ask.
Gotta ask. It's consumed this show for the last several weeks. I'd be remiss if I didn't. I-77 toll lanes. Now, you, for folks who are not caught up, this came before council a couple weeks ago in a somewhat unexpected vote. You voted against completely scrapping the plan. And then before we knew it, CRTPO took it up, officially killed the plan. It's done, gone, killed. Where does that leave us now as I-77 gets worse by the day?
Yes, so I want to be very clear that I was not against rescinding the support for I-77. Some of the concerns that the community had around taking people's home and businesses away for this toll roads, I was against that. I was also against community impact, negative community impact as a result of this toll road. However, on our agenda for that meeting was just the resolution. So I was caught off guard when there was a motion to rescind the support, which would have undone what majority of the council worked on, which was the resolution. And the resolution clearly called for finding an alternative to study non-toll options to ensure that there are no negative impacts to the communities, to ensure that we are addressing the community concerns around displacement. I mean, these are really valid concerns. So the resolution would have helped us use our leverage that we had to find a solution to address congestion and to reduce the crash rates on 77. I do not know where now what would be the solution as we have rescinded the support for I-77 toll lanes. I agree that toll lanes are not a great way to build infrastructure because there is a concept of induced demand. Where we can address congestion just for a short term, but in the long run, it does not address the underlying issue. So the resolution actually called for looking for that alternative study. Well, in the next coming weeks and months, the council is committed to working with NCDOT to find an alternative on what the solution would be to address congestion and reduce crash rates on 77 South.
How far back do you feel like this sets us?
I do not know whether NCDOT would be able to move towards some sort of alternative and come up with funding. I talked about how I was caught off guard because I wanted us to understand the implications of rescinding. And since we didn't really do much deeper dive on that, I do not know whether this sets us back 10 years or whether it does not set us back at all. I can't answer that question. But now we must come together to find a solution on addressing congestion and work with NCDOT. And toll lanes are not an option, not an alternative, because clearly they do not address congestion. We know that. 77 North is an example.
I know that one of the biggest implications, of course, is that money and the potential for them wanting some of the money back. Do you also have worries about just working with the General Assembly in the future, the city and the county, having to work with the state? It's already sometimes kind of a strange relationship. Do you think this is going to put more of a strain on it?
Well, that's always a concern, Julie, because, we do operate under a Dillon Rules state. So that is always a concern. And that's why governing requires always having that hat on that, when you do X, what is Raleigh going to do? And I think that's a question we always ask, at least I do, in terms of our relationship with the state.
I want to go back to something you said just a moment ago, though, because I feel like from an observer point of view, it's damning for city council when you say we took this vote and we weren't really sure of the implications and what happens next and what are the options going to be and what are the timelines going to be and what the state's going to do about it. It sounds like to me our city leaders sort of jumped off the diving board not knowing what was underneath it, which, I mean, a critical view of that would be, okay, that's reckless. Another view would be, okay, that's taxpayer money that's going down the drain, or at least to another project. Make it make sense to me.
Well, I can tell you, Ben, I think the action that the council took, the majority council took, was in direct response to the community's concerns. So I frame it as being responsive to the community, because the community did not want this project and they just wanted us to rescind the support. And there were dozens of homes that would have been taken as a result of this project. So certainly communities were had every right to be disappointed in this decision. So I believe at this point, how do we find an alternative that does address all of those concerns while helps us find a solution? And that is the balancing act.
A balancing act indeed, that you're juggling now with that and data centers and searching for a new mayor, and y'all got your hands full up there at the government center.
We sure do.
All right, Dimple Ajmera, Charlotte City Council member. Dimple, thank you as always. We do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Julie and Ben. Appreciate you both.
Of course. All right, we're back after this right here on Flashpoint.
All right, welcome back to Flashpoint. I know at the beginning we were making fun of the fact of doing another city episode, but we do actually have some South Carolina news.
Good.
We're going to get over there. Of course, the redistricting has been the biggest conversation. We thought it was going to pass, didn't pass last second. Of course, at the same time as early voting starting, and so a lot of the question was the impacts of how do you nullify those ballots that have already been cast. And so it does save a bit of a mess that would have ensued at the Board of Elections or the election commissioners, but now political impacts, of course, nationwide.
Right.
So we're going to take a look at Siobhan Riley's package from this week.
Congressman Jim Clyburn says Tuesday's vote reflected exactly what South Carolinians wanted to see. A constitutional process carried out according to the law.
There's something about that that's insulting to people. And I talked to enough Republicans in South Carolina who are absolutely incensed that the President of the United States has such little respect for them.
Jim Clyburn has been critical of President Donald Trump's push to redraw the state's congressional map. The measure passed the South Carolina House last week and would have scheduled a primary in August under new maps.
People were very angry. I watched some of the interviews that were taking place at polling places today. I don't know if I've ever seen voters as animated as I saw them today.
South Carolina saw a record turnout on the first day of early voting Tuesday ahead of the state's June primary elections that will continue as scheduled. The proposal would have removed Orangeburg County from Clyburn's district.
I don't know what all this is about, but I do know this. The congressional lines were looked at by the Supreme Court 2 years ago, and the Supreme Court said they were constitutional.
And senators said holding 3 elections in 5 months would create logistical challenges. There's also concern the new maps would possibly lead to Democrats gaining a congressional seat. In York County, Siobhan Riley, WCNC Charlotte.
This all happening, of course, as early voting is beginning.
Underway.
Their first meeting of the legislature in 40 years on a weekend, Memorial Day weekend, to try and get this hammered out. Of course, it's a direct call from President Trump and from the White House, and so will be interesting to see the implications going forward of Republicans not moving this forward, but of course that saves a lot of money and time for people at the Election Commission.
Save money, and this just would have been an MESS mess, legally and politically. And you can be the biggest fan of gerrymandering and redistricting, and the biggest, proponent of
Gerrymandering's number one fan.
Sure, this still would have been the mess of all messes. Trying to go back and discount some votes and not that.
Mail-in ballots already sent in. What do we do?
That's probably for the best.
Yes. It'll be interesting to see if they try again, but this time. Not this time.
All right, now the end of the show. We talk about what did we learn? What did you learn?
Wow, so many things. That was we covered a lot this time. I'm always going to be interested in I-77, but I think what I'm focused on right now is the mayoral process. I'm going to be really curious to see if they, go with James Mitchell.
I know.
Or if they choose someone from outside. I'm going to be really interested to see who from the outside applies. I know she listed some names that we've heard before, but them opening this up externally and having that public forum, I think is going to be really interesting.
And try to sort of enforce the idea that you can't run in 2027, even though they can't do
They
that.
can't enforce that. And they
Yeah.
talked about that at the meeting, and I can't remember who it was, because JD, Mesweros Arias, asked that question, and basically they were like, so you can just lie. And they were like, yeah, you can just lie.
It's-
It'll be interesting to see if that person decides to run again in
Yeah.
2027,
Yeah.
I guess, on that note. What did you take away from this?
I hate to beat the 77
I
drum,
know.
but I think it was telling, and I'm not sure she wanted to say it like this, but it was telling that Councilwoman Ajmera was basically saying that we took the vote and we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's next. We don't know what the state's going to do. We don't know what the General Assembly's going to do. We took the vote not knowing any of our options. And it's also clear that, and we already knew this, but public opinion had switched so hard on this and become so vocal that city council members clearly didn't feel like they had any other option at this point. And that's a testament to neighborhood groups who came out and said something, and some of the other groups like Sustain Charlotte. And kudos to them, because that's democracy. That's how you get things changed. I do think it's an indictment on city leaders that they did not have a better finger on the pulse of this issue and what was going to happen.
And the confusion surrounding it.
confusion
For days to come, we didn't know where this was going.
Yeah.
I think just the cloud of uncertainty, even during that meeting, was.
And still to this day, it's clear that they don't know what they're going to do now. So
I mean, with
guess
how
that's
long
what
it
I
took to
learned.
plan this one, I
know.
think we're looking
Years
down the road.
years.
Yeah.
All right, folks, that's going to have to do it for this edition of Flashpoint here inside the WCNC Charlotte app. Join us next week. We'll try not to be Charlotte focused next week.
You never know
know.
what they're going to
You
do,
never
but
know.
we're going to try our best.
We're going to try our best. All right, folks. See you next week.